I'd like to start this week's session with a reading, and it comes from a book by Christopher Aiken and Larry Bartels, and it's called Democracy for Realists. In the conventional view, democracy begins with the voters. Ordinary people have preferences about what their government should do. They choose leaders who will do those things, or they enact their preferences directly in referendums. In either case, what the majority wants becomes government policy, a highly attractive prospect in light of most human experience with governments. Democracy makes the people the rulers, and legitimacy derives from their consent. In Abraham Lincoln's stirring words from the Gettysburg Address, democratic government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. That way of thinking about democracy has passed into everyday wisdom, not just in the United States, but in a great many other democracies around the globe. It constitutes a kind of folk theory of democracy, a set of accessible, appealing ideas, assuring people that they live under an ethically defensible form of government that has their interests at heart. So in this kind of folk theory of democracy, by assumption, every citizen is treated equally. So whether you are poor, whether you are rich, your vote counts equally. It has equal sway when it comes to the policy-making process. Now, it's not a giant leap to see how the median voter theory of redistribution really relies on this idea, this folk theory of democracy. It is assuming that the median voter has preferences for redistribution based on their sort of material interests, their position in the income distribution. Now, the fact that we might see the evidence on the median voter theory of redistribution not really comply with the theoretical predictions, but generally sort of the reasons given do not necessarily shake the model at the core, but rather it's kind of something that's wrong with us, the voters. There's something going wrong with the median voter, or sort of people as voters in the income distribution more generally. So it could be that we don't have enough information about where we are in the income distribution, so our preferences aren't aligned with the material interests that we might expect. It might be that we have prospects of upward mobility, so we expect to be richer in the future, so we don't want to kind of vote for tax rates that might be high in case we end up being the people who are taxed in the future. But in both cases, it's because sort of these expected preferences don't show up in policy, but fundamentally it's sort of these expected preferences which are misaligned with the actual preferences of folks more generally. So if we take these ideas as a basis for thinking about how we might reduce inequality, we might say, well, if we give more people more information about where they actually are in the income distribution, then maybe their preferences will, become more aligned with what we might expect. Or perhaps we might give them more information about sort of the lack of stickiness in taxation rates over time. And both of these ideas really lives intact, that idea that all votes are treated equally. But what we're going to be doing in the next few videos is challenging that assumption. So what happens if all votes are not treated equally, and that actually people in different parts of the income distribution, their preferences show up quite differently in policy? Or what about the assumption, kind of challenging the assumption that these folks have interests in inequality in the first place? Do people care about inequality? And if they do, where do their beliefs about inequality come from? So these are the big questions that we're going to be looking at and addressing in the videos to come.